Good day, everybody. This narrated PowerPoint is a brief introduction to community psychology. For those of you that did an undergraduate module on community psychology, this may seem like a bit of a repetition, but I think it is important that we briefly reflect on what community psychology is to start to settle you into your role as a community psychology practitioner. You will also see that one of the discussion questions for your first individual assignment lecture is that you need to reflect on the documentary Born into Brothels from a community psychology perspective. So the information from this narrated PowerPoint is from the first chapter in Visser and Moleko and Elias Nair and Johnson Hakim. By the end of this video, you'll know how to define what community is and will know where to access information regarding the development of community psychology in South Africa. You will also have an understanding of how community psychology practice differs from individually focused psychological practice. So these are the source texts for this video, and you can see the specific pages of these chapters are indicated in red. Just to remind you that the second source is a chapter that I did upload to ClickUp, and you can download either the chapter or the parts that you need for each specific slide or lecture. So first, let's look at what a community is. Due to our historical past, we tend to connect a specific racial idea when we use the word communities. It is more likely that we use communities when we refer to people in Mamelodi than when we refer to people living in Waterkloof, is it not? The reason is that the concept of community was used both by the apartheid government to accentuate the differences between racial groupings and the Black consciousness movement that wanted to strengthen a sense of solidarity amongst people of color. The result is that a common mistake is made that community psychology is understood to work with underprivileged people in townships. We therefore have to make sure that we are aware that we automatically can conceptualize a community in the manner that reproduce apartheid terminology and possibly discriminatory practices that are part of defining a community. We also have to make sure that we don't think of a community as a homogeneous group. Rather, community is a complex concept that can be conceptualized according to a combination of 4 ideas. And we'll look at those 4 ideas right now. Okay, so the most well-known, and I've referred to this already, this definition of community is a community of a group of people in a geopolitical and a physical area. So that is the one we automatically connect to the word. Usually we can know who belong in this community by looking at boundaries or maps. And as you can see here, I have a map of Tshwane, so you can see where are the different areas. This is the city of Tshwane, so it's not just Pretoria or just Centurion. And you can see where are suburban density, that's in yellow, or where are rural and open land. So people who live in communities that are regulated or delineated by maps or boundaries, they have no choice but to have interpersonal relationships in this community because of their proximities to one another. So although I don't necessarily like my DJ neighbor's loud music, we do interact and greet one another, and sometimes we speak about the volumes of those house music beats vibrating through my flat. A community is defined according to the location, and they can be described according to their demographic characteristics such as socioeconomic level, land use, and type or quality of housing. For example, you can get high density housing versus rural settlements. You can also get infrastructure such as schools or businesses or factories. So that is community as a location. The second one is community as a network of social relationships. So community can also be defined as a network of people who share interests or values or common characteristics. So they don't need to live in the same geographical area, but because of their interactions or their socialization or role fulfillment or goal achievement, they form part of a community. If someone feels a sense of belonging or community, there are mutual influences between members of the group. Their individual needs are fulfilled and there is a sense of sharing of emotional connections. Then they are part of a community. Here is also where the concept of systems is a valuable way of conceptualizing a community as a network of social relationships. So from the screen, you can see that I got a little screen dump from the game Dota. And so if you play Dota with other players from all over the world, even though you don't know one another, you don't see one another face to face, you can be part of a community because you have social relationships. So this is the second one. The third way we can define communities is a social construction of a way of life. And here you have to think back at social constructionism and narrative practices in which we actually construct certain concepts of or groups or relationships or ideas. So as a constructions, communities are situated within their own history. They are situated within their own ideological past and present and constructed through the meaning people attach to their social and physical context. From this point of view, we can see communities as ever evolving as they interact with one another through events and crises, issues and possibilities. This way of life is what we, as community psychology practitioners, encounter when we interact with communities. So it's for us very important that we acknowledge and we do our best to try and understand each community's way of life. So here I've shown you pictures of 3 different communities involving senior citizens. And you can see each has its own construction of their way of life, depending on their context on all ecological levels. It could be a socio-economic level. It could be a racial level. It could be, if you look at the bottom left picture, it looks like it's only females. It might be a group of Gorgors that decide that they are going to construct a Gorgor group. So what one group experiences as a common character of way of life may seem alien to another group. And so it will be your job in your community to understand what is your community, what is your group's way of life. So the next one is communities can also be conceptualized as a socio-political organization. It means a community can reflect the political and other beliefs of people in any given context. One example is the punk subculture or a community that started in the UK and New York in the 1970s, but can now be found in many countries. This community, the punk community, is based on anti-establishment ideologies, and they include a variety of anti-racist and anti-sexist ideas. So they express ideas through their own music genre, punk rock music, and the most influential punk rock band in the 1970s, and they contributed to the start of this movement, was called the Sex Pistols. And their band members included Sid Vicious and Johnny Rotten. So from their stage names, you can already get an idea of their point of view as a socio-political organization. Their version of God Save the Queen which is the UK national anthem, attacks the social conformity of the British and their deference towards the Queen. You can go look at this on the YouTube, so you can just search Sex Pistols, God Save the Queen, and usually there are lyrics involved. You can read the lyrics and you can see what are the beliefs underlying the Sex Pistols and the punk movement. Other socio-political communities can include, for example, the anti-gender-based violent activists. So community psychology is a relatively new branch of psychology, developed as a reaction to the inability of traditional individualistic clinical psychology to intervene on a group level to address the psychosocial need of communities. I suggest that you read more about the development of community psychology in the above sources that I've shown you. The first is a journal article available for download from the UP library, and the second is section 1.2 of the chapter Visser's chapter in Visser and Moleko's Community Psychology in South Africa book. Both these pieces will give you a good indication of the unique development of community psychology in our country. And it will also hint at the specific values, principles, and goals of community psychology practice in South Africa. So why should you read this? These two pieces of reading will give you good ideas for interpreting the Born into Brothels documentary, as you will better understand how social dynamics are involved in the development of a group-based intervention. In the CDAT and Lazarus article, there is a lot of focus on the interpenetrating ideas and goals of critical theory and community psychology, which I hope will guide you in identifying social biodynamics at play in Born into Brothels. The videos that I embedded for you to watch on Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, there are short clips, but that will even give you a better idea of how to understand power dynamics at play in education. And it's important because you will be doing a psychoeducational intervention. So community psychology practitioners are interested in understanding and intervening at community, society, and organizational level. So how does our practice differ from others that also have the same goals, like political power parties and civil society organizations, like NGOs? The difference is we apply well-established psychological principles and techniques to improve the well-being and effectiveness at various ecological levels. And that could also include the individual level of intervention. Another aspect of community psychology practitioning is that we collaborate with others to provide cost-effective, appropriate service to strengthen systems in communities. So we want to create sustainable change. We therefore attempt to build on existing strengths and resources in our target communities, and that is the reason you will be doing a needs and resource analysis with your specific group or community. So a notable aspect of community psychology is that we practice praxis, and that is our research and our practice continually speak to one another. Research is not separate from the real world, the ivory tower, which is why research approaches such as action research, participatory action research is integrated within psychological practice. So we, if you look at the picture, build the bridge between theory and practice, and that is called praxis. Praxis can also refer to when you look at your own practice, you make changes to it because you are reflective, you've seen that you need to make changes, and then you make the changes and see what happens. That is also what praxis is. So community psychology is applied, relevant, impactful, and responsive to contextual needs. That comes from Elias et al., page 39. So the next narrated PowerPoint will look at the underlying values and goals of community psychology practice. But before you watch the next video, please reflect in writing. Don't just think about it, write it down on your community where you will do an intervention. How can you define your community? According to each of those four, maybe? What is the glue that sticks them together? Is it geographically? Ideologically, that do have mutual needs, and what is their way of life? What do you need to understand about their way of life for you to understand what their needs are, and for you to understand what would be a good intervention for them? Compare your ideas with your co-facilitators' ideas around your intervention community. Learn from them and learn from each other. That is what a team is about. And if you look at your group assignment, we do ask you to reflect on the process of co-facilitation. So let this be the start of it. So use what you have gleaned from this reflection to add to the first section of your group assignment, to guide you with your needs and resource analysis, and to help you to start to understand what it is you're going to write in your group assignment. So you can see that I've given you the questions there. You can pause the video or you can take a picture of it, and please make the effort to write it down in your reflective diary. So this is the end of the first narrated PowerPoint. Please have a look on ClickUp for the next video or narrated PowerPoint, which would be more on the values and goals and some of the principles of community psychology.